Please give the money back. That was my father's money. I demanded this from my sister-in-law, who took $50,000 from the safe during my father's funeral.
No way. I've already spent it on paying off debts.
What?
If I knew this would happen, I should have taken more money. Your father was such a convenient ATM.
What the?
Oh, are you going to be our ATM now? Being the child of your father, I bet if we pretend to be in a little trouble, you'll easily give us money, right?
My sister-in-law said that and laughed. My clenched fists were trembling and I could hardly contain my anger. Just as I was about to scream, "Don't mess with me," my mother next to me suddenly burst out laughing loudly and I lost my chance to shout. And I seriously worried that my mother had gone crazy from the shock. Moreover, after finishing laughing, my mother said, "Tell Angela thank you for taking the money." Encouraged by my mother's words, my sister-in-law said, "Your father-in-law is one thing, but your mother-in-law is something else. Well, thanks to her, I'm saved." And then she hung up the phone. Indescribable emotions swirled within me. My mother turned to me with a smile and said, "You know about that money. My name is Ellie. I work as a medical administrator at a private hospital. Living at home with my parents, the three of us lead a life without any luxuries, but I find happiness in our ordinary days and in having my parents, who are both over the age of 70, healthy and with me. It's amazing how we've made it this far, on a pleasant, sunny holiday." I suddenly thought this while drinking the tea my mother made. Our family often finds ourselves in misfortune. The reason is none other than my father's personality. My father is what you'd call a good-natured person. He can't leave someone in trouble alone and tends to agree to anything if asked for help. Sometimes he buys products in bulk or often lends money. And there were times when the money wasn't returned, leading to financial hardship. In the worst cases, he even ended up taking on debts himself. There were times I couldn't help but be angry at my father and times I was just dumbfounded. Yet, the reason I can live in the same house with my parents, drinking the same tea and feeling at peace, is all thanks to my mother. My cheerful mother remains nonchalant whether my father is lending money or receiving a large amount of goods he ordered. Even when we had to take on his debts, she seemed a bit surprised but quickly accepted the situation, saying, "Worrying won't help anyway." Although she seemed exasperated by my father's personality, my mother somehow always forgave him.
Sure, I wish he would stop if he could. But this is also part of what makes your father a great person.
When my father ended up taking on debts a second time, my mother shrugged and responded to my pleas to do something about him.
He's a good-natured person to the core. Sometimes he gets taken advantage of.
Are you okay with this, Mom? It feels like we're always the ones losing out. Even so, thanks to your father's personality, we often receive kindness from others and benefit a lot. Despite hearing my mother's words, I remained unconvinced and silent. Seeing me like this, my mother stopped her admonishing tone and spoke to me as if to a friend.
Isn't it better to be happy being used by others than to be happy using them? It's okay. Somehow, we're all living happily as a family like this. That's what happiness is all about, isn't it?
Indeed. Convinced by my mother's words, I guess I've inherited some of my father's good-naturedness after all. Completely persuaded by my mother's reasoning, I was able to view the tragedies brought about by my father as storms and sometimes even as comedies. However, there was one person for whom this was not the case. My brother, Chris. My brother, 3 years older than me, used to get irritated by our father's personality, just like I did. While I was reluctantly able to accept my father's personality, my brother was different. As he grew older, my brother's attitude visibly worsened, and he left home as soon as he entered college. Whenever my brother, who knew my father's personality inside out, showed up at home, he would always ask my father for money. This did not change whether my brother became a working adult, got married, or even when my father reached the age of 60. Despite my brother being in his mid-40s, just last month my brother suddenly showed up and asked our father for money. I have tried to persuade my brother to stop this behavior numerous times. However, my brother has never accepted my words.
What's wrong with taking money from someone who's willing to give it? I'm just using what's available. I'm not doing anything wrong.
That's how he mockingly puts it. I couldn't help but feel angry at my brother. I know how much effort my mother put in when my father had to take on debts and when we were struggling financially. Cutting back on groceries, saving rigorously, and extending her part-time hours, my mother did everything she could to the best of her ability. Despite that, I couldn't forgive my brother who, unaware of our mother's struggles, pestered our father for money out of a desire for spending cash. It wasn't just my brother. My sister-in-law was the same. Although my sister-in-law didn't show up directly, she was telling my brother to get money from our father.
Something about needing money for a new bag from her favorite brand.
My brother, happy about receiving money from our father, had mentioned this to me. Those words made me realize instantly. My sister-in-law was of the same kind as my brother. Neither my brother nor my sister-in-law probably see anything wrong in using people. They seem to think it's fine as long as they can live a life of luxury. Of course, it irked me to see my father being exploited by such a couple. But no matter what I say, he would probably give money to my brother again if he asked. In this situation, it's up to me to provide support. Resolving myself to this, I continue to live with my parents to this day. However, an unbearable misfortune occurred to our family, which had managed without much concern despite various difficulties. My father was diagnosed with cancer. This cancer, known as cholangiocarcinoma, often shows no early symptoms, and by the time my father sought medical help for his pain, it was already at stage 4. He underwent chemotherapy with weekly hospital visits, but his condition continued to worsen. He was able to live at home for a few months, but eventually had to be hospitalized. Throughout the outpatient treatments and even after hospitalization, my mother supported my father with her inherent cheerfulness. My father must have been greatly helped by my mother's presence. But it seemed that my mother was also somehow keeping herself together because my father was there in front of her. I say this because I had witnessed my mother crying alone at home.
I'm sorry. After all the trouble I've caused, and now this happens to me.
What are you talking about? If you're hospitalized, at least we won't have sudden deliveries of bulk purchases, right? If anything, I'm relieved.
Saying this, my mother, who had been joking to make my father laugh in the hospital room, was crying. Seeing her like that, I painfully realized that the bond between my father and mother was stronger than I had ever thought. When I thought about what could be done for them, the first thing that came to mind was my brother's existence. Even though he rarely comes home and only shows up to ask for money, family is still family. Despite everything, both my father and mother seemed a bit happy when my brother visited home. I thought that if my brother came to visit, both my father and mother would be happy. With that thought, I contacted my brother. However, no matter how many times I reached out, I got no reply. Losing patience, I called him and my brother responded with words that made me question our blood relation.
If he's hospitalized, that means Dad doesn't have any money, right? No way I'm going if there's no money in it for me.
Even in a situation where it was uncertain what would happen to our father, all he thought about was money. I was profoundly disappointed in my brother. And failing to convince my brother made me realize how powerless I was to do anything for my father and mother. While I was crushed by my own helplessness, my father's condition continued to deteriorate. About 2 weeks after being hospitalized, my father passed away while being watched over by my mother and me. Until the end, my mother never let her smile fade in front of my father. Thinking about how much determination was behind my mother's smile made me feel overwhelmed. Even such a strong mother, upon being officially informed by the doctor that my father was no longer in this world, cried with me, our shoulders huddled together. But true to form, that's my mother. After a good cry, my mother said, "All right," and wiped away her tears. Then she turned to me with a smile and said, "It's going to get busy from here." True to my mother's words, there were many things that needed to be done, like the wake, the funeral, and various other arrangements. Somehow, we reached the day of the memorial service. My brother and his wife, who hadn't shown up for the wake the day before, were nowhere to be seen even as the time for the service approached, and they hadn't responded to any messages. Towards the end of the funeral, a relative approached my mother, seemingly asking about my brother, and she responded with a bitter smile. Seeing my mother like that, my anger towards my brother started to boil up inside me. Returning home in such a state of anger, I was greeted by a shocking sight before I could feel the exhaustion from the tumultuous days. The door to the safe in our house was open. The safe was empty and there were no signs of anything else being disturbed. Standing next to my mother, who was staring dumbfounded, I immediately sensed that it was my brother's doing. "Hey, Chris, what do you think you're doing?" That's how I started the call, yelling. But the voice that responded was not my brother's, but my sister-in-law Angela's.
Can you not yell?
"Angela, where's my brother?"
Chris is busy right now. So what is it? If there's nothing important, can I hang up?
My sister-in-law's tone was dripping with annoyance. Her attitude only amplified my anger. "You stole the money from the safe, didn't you?" When I asked in a low voice, my sister-in-law responded with the same unbothered tone, clearly annoyed as before.
That $50,000. I didn't steal it. I just took it, okay?
"What? How can you say you didn't steal it when you took it without permission, and you didn't even show up for Dad's funeral?"
Well, if we went to the funeral, no one would be there, right? It seems like it would be troublesome if you guys were there.
My sister-in-law showed no signs of remorse. Thinking that talking to her any further would only frustrate me, I swallowed what I wanted to say and made a straightforward demand. "Please return the money." "That was my father's money." I spoke with anger in my voice. However, the words that came back from my sister-in-law left me dumbfounded.
No way. I already spent it on paying off debts. I don't have a single penny left. Since I don't have it, it's impossible to return it.
"What?
If I knew it would come to this, I should have taken more money. Your father was such a convenient ATM. What am I going to do now?"
What the?
So are you going to be our ATM now? Being the child of your father, I bet if you pretend to be in a little trouble, you'll easily give us money, right?
My sister-in-law said this, laughing. My clenched fists were trembling and I could hardly contain my anger. Just as I was about to scream, "Don't mess with me," my mother next to me suddenly burst out laughing loudly and I lost my chance to shout. And I seriously worried that my mother had gone crazy from the shock. Moreover, after finishing laughing, my mother said, "Tell Angela thank you for taking the money." It was all laughter and words that I couldn't comprehend. Already on the verge of exploding with anger, I became irritated with my mother as well.
Are we supposed to just let my sister-in-law take advantage of us like this?
With that thought, I said, "But, Mom," trying to calm her down. However, my mother waved it off, saying, "It's okay, it's okay." Encouraged by my mother's words, my sister-in-law said, "Your father is one thing, but your mother is something else. Well, thanks to her, I'm saved." And then she hung up the phone. Indescribable emotions swirled within me. My mother turned to me with a smile and said, "You know about that money."
What? So that means?
I was surprised by my mother's words, but at the same time I understood the earlier "thank you." A few days later, my brother and his wife came and rang the doorbell furiously. My mother, seemingly having anticipated this, opened the door without any sign of panic, saying, "Yes, yes."
Hey, what's this all about? Why is this being sent to me?
Saying so, my brother slammed down a dinning letter. Whether out of anger or panic, my brother's face was red, but my mother, unconcerned, said nonchalantly,
That's the debt your father had been carrying.
What? Why is the dunning letter for Dad's debt being sent to me?
Because you two took that $50,000. We couldn't make this month's payment. Since the payment deadline is past, it's only natural that a dunning letter would arrive, isn't it?
Without changing her expression, my mother calmly replied. My brother, unable to hide his irritation, raised his voice at her.
Like I care. I'm asking why it's coming to me. If it's a dunning letter for Dad's debt, it should be sent to you.
But Chris, didn't you inherit Dad's estate? Since you inherited it, It makes sense that it's addressed to you, doesn't it?
Don't make decisions like that on your own. I'm not taking on any debt. You guys deal with it.
My brother was outraged, but my mother, unconcerned, casually responded again.
That's impossible. We've already renounced the inheritance.
What?
Since it seemed like Chris would inherit the estate, Ellie and I renounced our rights to it. So, all of Dad's estate belongs to Chris now.
All of it? Are you sure?
The moment you use Dad's estate, it's considered that you intended to accept the inheritance. It's called simple acceptance, but let's not get into complicated stuff.
My mother continued, but it seemed like her words weren't reaching my brother. Hearing he would get all the inheritance, the corners of my brother's eyes drooped. The sister-in-law standing next to my brother was smirking, but the two of them understood nothing. To such a couple, my mother continued without changing her tone.
I'm really relieved that Chris took the inheritance. Dad had to take on more debt a little while ago, so there's hardly any money left. All that's left is the debt and maybe this house?
What?
What?
The voices of my brother and sister-in-law overlapped. They probably never thought Dad had no money left, given how much they had taken over the years. The sister-in-law spoke up before my flustered brother could. She couldn't hide her panic either.
Wait a minute. You can't call this inheriting an estate. It's just being saddled with debt.
Out of panic and anger, the sister-in-law spoke rapidly. However, my mother responded calmly.
An inheritance includes negative assets as well. Please don't put it in such bad terms. Not just the debt, but this house also properly becomes Chris's.
Huh? This house won't even make a dent in the debt. If it was known this was the inheritance, Chris would have renounced it. It's your fault for not telling us.
What's there to tell? Who is it that didn't show their face after Dad died, didn't contact us, and just took the money from the safe on their own?
She replied with a smile, but an aura of anger was emanating from my mother. For the first time, I witnessed my mother truly angry. My brother must have felt the same. Sensing our mother's anger, my brother, with a change in his complexion, started to apologize.
Mom, I was wrong. I'll somehow return that $50,000. So let me renounce the inheritance due, please.
How are you going to come up with $50,000? You're already in debt. There's no way you can prepare that amount.
Shut up. Don't speak when you can't even properly earn money.
The couple started an ugly fight in front of us, but after silencing his wife, my brother turned back to us.
Hey, Ellie, talk to Mom too, please. You wouldn't abandon a brother in trouble, would you?
My brother said this, looking at me with teary eyes. However, my heart remained unmoved. Dad was indeed a fool for being too kind, but he was never such a fool to steal from others and hang himself with his own rope.
Ellie.
I think I inherited Dad's kindness, Stu, but I'm not foolish enough to listen to someone as selfish as you.
Hey, can't you going to help me?
Reap what you sow. Dad was always clear about that.
My mother delivered the final blow to my brother, who was still trying to cling to me. Frozen by my mother's angry voice, my brother couldn't even move. Seeing my brother in a daze, I thought the matter was settled and tried to lead my mother back inside the house. However, the moment we turned to leave, we heard my sister-in-law scream.
You're saying you won't help even when family is in trouble.
Someone who refers to their family as an ATM is not needed in the family.
That is...
My sister-in-law's body flinched. I shot a sharp look at my sister-in-law, whose face was filled with despair. If you plan on staying any longer, I'll call the police. The safe is just as it was, so if we have it investigated as a robbery, it will quickly become clear that you two are the culprits.
Wait, just wait.
If you don't want to become criminals, never get involved with this again. Now, leave at once. They probably didn't want to be branded as criminals on top of being burdened with debt. At my words, they fled as if running away. Afterwards, my brother ended up burdened not only with his own debt, but also with our father's, seemingly unable to make ends meet. They sold the inherited family home, but the house, being decades old, fetched almost no price, and the land didn't sell for much either. My brother, who had assumed our father left a substantial inheritance, quit his job right after our father passed away. Upon learning that there was nothing but debt instead of a substantial amount, my brother apparently wanted to return to his job, but the company refused to take back my inherently unserious brother. My sister-in-law, who also has debts, lacks the confidence to support herself and thus remains unable to divorce my brother, who is burdened with a massive debt. Currently, both are juggling multiple part-time jobs, working desperately day and night, yet there seems to be no end in sight for their debt repayment. Meanwhile, we rented an apartment that was just right for the two of us and started a new life. My mother regained her former cheerfulness and, having more free time, started various new hobbies. Only my mother could make several friends so quickly in a new place. I deeply respect my mother, who, like my father, is well-liked and cherished by others. I aspire to be a strong and cheerful woman like my mother, and to live my life in such a manner.